Confident, confident, confident. I can be confident, 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 confident. I can be confident at work.
Hello and welcome to the Confident at Work podcast. I'm celebrating today because the podcast is officially 3 years old. And I've used it as a bit of a moment to have a little think about things and to take stock and to acknowledge how far we've come and do a little bit of celebrating, because one of the things that I'm always encouraging you guys to do, because I know it's good for confidence, is to reflect on progress. Think about how far you've come. Notice the things that you've done, the things that you've put energy and attention into, and acknowledge yourself for them. And so today I'm doing that, but for the podcast. And I was thinking, I really want to do something for this 3-year episode. And I wasn't sure, and I was kind of scratching around for ideas. And my sister-in-law, Kate, said to me, why don't you tell people your story and where you've come from and how you ended up here, like the story so far? And I thought, that's not a bad idea. I've never done that on the podcast before. So we're going to do a little bit of that today. But first, a little bit of reflection, because the podcast is now 3 years old and we've had over 34,000 listens, 146 episodes, and I can see the data about where people listen, so where people tune in from. And honestly, you guys are listening all over the world. It's quite amazing to see where people are listening from. It all started, obviously, with episode 1, How to Be More Confident at Work. And that episode still gets people listening to it nearly every day. Honestly, I like looking at the stats. I think since I deleted all the social media apps off my phone, I find other things to look at. Smartphone addiction, eh? And one of the things that I love to look at is the podcast stats. And to be honest, I don't really know what they mean. I don't know what they mean. I see numbers, I see places, but those numbers, they don't really mean anything, not by themselves. But what does mean something is very occasionally, well, actually, not very occasionally, it happens with some regularity. Someone reaches back through the internet and tells me something about what they've changed, what they've done, or something that has stuck with them from a podcast episode. And honestly, that means something. Because obviously, I record these from my own podcast studio, aka my bedroom, because it has the most soft furnishings. And I send these out into the world. They get listened to all over the world. People put them in their ears, whether they're on their dog walk or in their car on their way to work or on their train. And you spend that time with me, but I don't know about it. And then sometimes I get to know about it and I just love it. One day a woman emailed me and she said, I just needed to say thank you very much for your podcast episode about what to do when you feel nervous. Me and my daughter were driving to the test center and my daughter was taking a driving test and she was so nervous that we listened to your podcast in the car and we did the exercise that you recommended and we both really calmed down. And I never found out whether she passed her test. I hope she did. Not that my podcast is specifically for people taking their driving test, but there you go. You never know where you're going to end up. And on that morning, it was in a car with a mother and daughter on their way to take the driving test. You can actually leave comments as well on the podcast now, I think just via Spotify. And somebody'd put on one of the episodes, I really needed to hear this today. I think it was the episode about what to do if you get talked over or dismissed at work. I just hoped, just by having that little episode in her ears, probably that 20 minutes, it gave her something that she needed, some little boost, some little bit of acknowledgement, something. Recently, a woman posted on LinkedIn and she said, I've got to shout out this podcast because I found it and it's been amazing and I really recommend it. And it was my podcast. It was so thoughtful, her message. I didn't know her. I didn't think we had any connection to each other at all. I don't think we do. But she'd found the podcast. She was a listener and she wanted to recommend it to other people. And again, I was like, that's one, it's really nice of her, but I'm guessing she probably didn't do it to be nice. I'm guessing that she did it because she actually found something useful in the podcast and she thought, "Do you know what? I reckon there's other people that will probably find this useful too." And the little moments like that, they mean something. Like the stats, I don't really know what they mean, but those moments mean something. And the fact that I get to go places with you, whether I'm in your car, whether I'm just in your ears on a walk, whether I'm in your living room while you're cleaning, I don't know where I am. But the fact that I get to be somewhere with you, that means something to me, even if we never get to talk. Oh, and I forgot to tell you the most exciting story. I was coming home on the train from somewhere and I was stood behind a group of 4 seats, and the woman was looking at her phone screen, and I could see, because it was quite big, and she was right next to me on her phone screen, that she was listening to the podcast. And I could not believe it. So I'm stood on the train in London behind this woman who is listening to the podcast. She's got her earpods in, and I'm just like, you can't see me. I'm doing like a surprised face. I couldn't say anything. I was so excited. I wanted to be like, "Oh my God, you're listening to the podcast." But I didn't dare say anything because I was embarrassed. So I just pretended like I hadn't seen it and carried on with my train ride. Oh, yeah. Anyway, this is the joy that the podcast brings me, especially when I realize that it's actually out in the wild with you. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about how I actually ended up here doing this podcast. And I hope this isn't too self-indulgent. So 3 years ago, just over 3 years ago, I left my full-time job to run Confident at Work full-time. And I started doing the podcast immediately. I'd had it in my head for maybe like a year and a half, that I kind of wanted to do a podcast. I'd bought a microphone and I hadn't done it yet, but it felt like the right time to start when I launched the business full time, and I've been doing it ever since. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of a career history, right? Because we talk about work, and I've probably like thrown random things in there about my jobs, about how did I end up here behind this microphone recording the Confident at Work podcast and doing what I do now. So first, I'm going to tell you actually what I do now, because I I had a consult with somebody recently. So he wanted to talk to me about coaching and about how I could help him to feel more confident at work. And he said, "You know, I've been listening to your podcast for ages, and I didn't know you did this, i.e., coaching people, helping them feel more confident at work." And I was like, wow, maybe I'm actually not being very explicit about the things that I actually do and the stuff that I can help you with. I was like, I'm pretty sure I say it on every episode, but maybe I say it right at the end. Maybe this guy's already logged off. I don't know. But within Confident at Work, I obviously host this podcast, but I work with people one-on-one coaching. And I also go into organizations and I do training, workshops, that kind of thing, speaking, all under this banner of Confident at Work. And everything is aimed at supporting people to feel more confident at work. But this has been a journey, right? I haven't always done this. And I guess people would have always said about me, "Oh, she's very confident." However, I have not always felt very confident. So, you know how you can look confident because you say yes to a lot of things and you always take the opportunity and you're always going for the next thing. And if you listen to this podcast, you probably do this. If you're one of my people, you probably do the same thing, right? You put yourself out there, you say yes to something, and then afterwards you feel sick and you think, "Oh my God, what have I done?" And I just have had a way of doing this my whole life. So I guess, well, people said I always looked very confident, but I wasn't always very confident. Inside, I had a lot of, I would call it like mental drama, like the internal drama. I had a really strong inner critic voice inside. I worried with a lot of doubts, and I would really criticize myself for making a mistake, and I would kind of gloss over stuff that I'd done well and just like be moving on to the next thing. So if you haven't taken the confidence assessment, go and take it. And it's going to ask you a load of questions, basically designed to figure out, are you like that on the inside? And if you are, we know that it's doing something to your confidence. And it was doing something to mine. So even though I would say yes to things and I would move ahead, I would go for the promotion, I would speak up, I would do all of that, inside, it felt really quite hard. I would get terribly nervous before things, and actually, I still do get a bit nervous before things now. Actually, not really as much as I used to, but I used to get terribly nervous before things. I would be like sweating, when you feel that like spiky sweating feeling under your arms. Sorry to talk about that if that grosses you out. But generally, I kind of have always taken this approach where I say yes to things, I do things, I try things. Career wise, I started off as a solicitor lawyer, I guess, for people who aren't in the UK. And I qualified in, I think it was I think it was actually 2008 when I qualified. So global financial crisis, right? Not a good time. A lot of people getting laid off, a lot of people having their hours cut down. And because it was 2008, I was like, what would be like a recession proof part of law? And I went and did healthcare because I thought, you know what? There's always going to be people who have problems with their healthcare. There's always going to be healthcare claims, maybe even more so in a recession than in a time where things are good. So I went into it and I absolutely loved it. And I worked in that quite a few years, good few years. So I would represent people. I would work on behalf of people who'd been injured as a result of their medical treatment. And the stuff I did, it was like serious injuries, birth injuries, tetraplegia, all kinds of really serious stuff. And I learned a lot doing that job because you were working for a client he either who had died and you were representing their family, or a patient who had been seriously injured as a result of their medical treatment and their whole life had completely changed. And I think I grew up a lot doing that job. And it kind of made me realize how lucky I was because I still had, all of my limbs were working and, all of my systems were working, and it made me feel quite grateful. And I enjoyed doing that job because it was very personal as well as really interesting in terms of the medicine and all of that. And then I went on to think, okay, well, I don't really want to climb the ranks in this law firm. Probably not going to do that forever. Maybe, I don't know if I want to be a lawyer forever, and maybe I'll go and try something else. So I went into the NHS, which is a national health service in the UK. If you're listening outside the UK, we have free at the point of access medical care. We do not pay for medical insurance if we don't want to. It's an amazing system. And we have this thing, the NHS, and it looks after us from when we're born, before we're born, to when we die. And it is a wonderful um, thing. Anyway, so I went to work for the NHS. I kind of changed sides and I went to work for the NHS, helping support them when people were bringing claims against them. So paying them if they needed to be paid and defending them if they needed to be defended. So I kind of switched sides. It was a bit of a poacher turned gamekeeper moment for me. And it felt like a bit of a risk. And when I left, people were like, oh my God, you're going to work in the NHS like you're taking a pay cut. Oh, what weird. Anyway, it was a good choice. It felt like a bit of a leap at the time, but it turned out to be a good choice. There were so many interesting things happening. There were so many opportunities. The organization was growing. They were really thinking about, how to support patient care and how to kind of feed messages back into the system from the things that they were seeing that was going wrong. That it was great. And I said yes to loads of opportunities. I really kind of, I guess you would call it networking. I got to know loads of people across the organization. I was always like helping out with stuff, learning, developing, blah, blah, blah. And when I became a manager for the first time in that organization, or I was a deputy team leader, I wanted to figure out how do I be a better manager. I ended up listening to this podcast called Coaching for Leaders, which is still around, by the way. And this guy obviously was talking about coaching for leaders. I was like, coaching, I don't even know what that is. And my work had said when I'd gone for this job, oh, yes, we use a coaching approach to management. And I was like, yeah, of course, great. Like nodding, no idea what that means. So I thought, oh, I better find out about this coaching approach, given that I don't really know what it is, but I'm actually supposed to be using it. So I found out, and that led me to a afternoon somewhere in a room in North London, open day for a coach training. My friend James, shout out to James, had invited me. And I was like, I'm free. It's a Sunday afternoon. I'll go to this coach training. So I did. And the guy who was doing the training said, has anyone got a problem that they need help with? And I was like, actually, I have to go tomorrow, it was Monday morning, and tell my boss whether I'm going to stay in this secondment that I'm in because I'd been seconded to a policy and strategy role, or whether I was going to go back to the claims team, which I'd done before. And I had no idea what I was going to say. Literally no idea. I didn't know. And the guy said, okay, great, sit down. 15 minutes later, he'd coach me and I knew exactly what I was going to do. So much so that when we had the coffee break, people were saying, "Oh, was that real? Were you like a plant?" And I was like, "No, I've never met this guy. Like it was real." And one of the things that I thought I could do was I could do this training that these people were offering. And I decided to train as a coach. This will be good for work because they're expecting me to take a coaching approach and all the rest of it. And anyway, I'll just do it with work, leave it on the side. And then I trained, and I think this was in it was 2017 or 2018. As part of our assessment, we recorded sessions and they were assessed by one of our coach training assessors. And they would listen to the entire thing, an entire hour, or watch an entire hour of the video of us coaching. And then they would say, at minute 7, you did this. At like 6 minutes and 32, you did this. What were you thinking? You could have asked this. You could have gone into that. You missed this. How about this? How about that? And they would pick apart every single aspect of what you did. Great. It was great training. It was very rigorous to make sure that you were meeting the standard that they needed. But oh my, the first one I got, I was like, well, that was terrible. And I was like, oh my God. But I thought, "Do you know what? If I carry on, I will figure this out." Now, I didn't know that then, but now I know this is called a growth mindset. So you get feedback, it's terrible. And instead of hiding under a rug and thinking, well, I'll never do that again, which don't get me wrong, I've done that with some things. I failed my climbing exam. I've never been back. But when it comes to the coach training, I'm going to have to take what she said and learn from it. And the next one will be better. And it was. And the next one will be better. And it was. And the next one will be better. And it was. And I passed, which was great. And then I started coaching at work. So I set up a group of coaches because it turned out there was kind of 5 or 6 or 7 of us. And we had this little cohort of coaches that would coach people internally at work. And I loved it. Then I would take some private practice clients on the side, and I was trying to set up my own website. Gosh, that took me a long time and it was crap. And all of that went on for a good while. Fast forward 4 years from when I qualified, I decided that I was gonna leave my job. And some people, I guess they make these huge, brave leaps into the unknown, but I was more gonna save up money, gonna, like, build things up, gonna get loads of experience under my belt, gonna get some clients, I did things not in a leap and the net will appear way, in a we'll go at this semi cautiously and see what happens. And that led me to well, 3 years ago, last month, having my leaving do, leaving work. Very sad to leave all my gorgeous colleagues. I actually saw them at somebody else's leaving do a couple of weeks ago, and I still miss them. But that led me to leaving, setting up Confident at Work, and doing this full time. And here we are now. And when I first left, I think it was a little bit scary. And when I told my mum and dad, "Oh, I'm quitting my job and I'm going to go and do this coaching thing full time," it was hilarious. I was sat across the table from them, and my dad did a little fist pump and he was like, "You go, girl." And he was like smiling, he looked really happy. It's not something that he would normally say, but he did. And my mom on the other side of the table from him put her head in her hands and said, "Oh dear, what about your pension?" And I was like, "Oh, you two, you're like the 2 sides of my brain." One of them's like, "You go, girl," and the other one's like, "What about your pension?" So, yeah, nice to see that reflected in real life. And I was single by this point, right? I used to be married, but I was single by this point. I had separated from my husband and I was getting a divorce. So it was only me, right? It was only me that was going to be paying the mortgage and putting food on the table. And that was kind of worrying. So I'd saved up some cash, as any slightly cautious person would do. And I was like, right, I've got enough of a buffer. And if it all doesn't work, I can go back to a legal job or whatever and just, pick up my life and carry on. Which is all great in theory, isn't it? But it doesn't stop the kind of internal fear. And actually, by day, I was kind of okay. But by night, I would wake up in the night, and this lasted for, honestly, I swear it was months. It might not have been, but it felt like it was. I would wake up and I would be calculating what was like Excel spreadsheets in my head, trying to figure out like the money, the rent, blah, the mortgage, blah. And I would wake up and my brain would be engaged in this mammoth spreadsheet exercise. And I would kind of come to and be like, you're not even good at maths. Like, why are you trying to calculate these spreadsheets in your head while I'm asleep? But that was the way it was for quite a while. And then I kind of found my feet a little bit and I got into it and it was okay. And I've been able to pay myself from day one, which I very much appreciate because I know that not all businesses are able to do that. And I'm still doing that 3 years later. So that is pretty cool. And I won't say that there hasn't been some more hairy moments along the way. There was this one bit where I just felt like I'd completely lost my mojo. That was bad. Thank God it's back. And there was another bit where I was super stressed about money. That was bad. And yeah, so basically, turns out having a business is like normal life. There's times where things are good, there's times where things are not as good. It is like having a job. There's times where you like it, there's times where you don't like it. There's good things about it, there's bad things about it. I have a lot of freedom and I don't work as many hours as I used to. I'm not really very stressed, which is nice. And somebody said to me recently, "Oh, do you miss law?" And I was like, "No, not really." And then I thought back, and there was that client that didn't pay my invoice. And I'd waited and waited, and I'd chased them, and they just were not paying this invoice. And I thought, "Oh, great. I'm going to sue them. I'm going to do small claims process, and I'll do it all myself, and it's going to be so cool." And then they paid, and I was like, "Oh, they paid. I was going to sue them." And I thought, well, maybe I do miss being a lawyer just a tiny little bit. But generally, am I glad I made this move 3 years later? Yes. I can't think of having not made it now. It would be too weird to think of it. I miss my colleagues. I think I will miss always having colleagues. I love colleagues. I loved my team. I loved the people that I worked with. I always have done actually my whole career. I guess I like people. And now I enjoy working with people in a different way. I really enjoy coaching people. The level of relationship that you get, the level of support that you're able to provide, the level of access people give you to the inside of their minds and to the insides of their life, it is such a privilege, I can't tell you. And working with organizations as well. So I work with various organizations, various businesses, and they send me people for coaching, or they have me in to do a workshop or to train their staff or do some speaking. And those relationships have been really amazing as well, actually. So once I start working with an organization, I tend to carry on. Um, I don't tend to have a lot of one-offs. I tend to kind of we seem to form a relationship and then, we're still working together 3 years later or 2 years later or whatever it is. And I really have appreciated that too. And I've had a lot of support from those um, people in those organizations who have been doing these kinds of things a lot longer than I have. And then I've had also great coaches along the way. So I've had a lot of coaching along the way. And it's meant that I've never had to do it on my own. I've had support for my mind and for those moments where things have been really tricky and for those moments where I've been wobbling or panicking or just downright down. And I've had people to celebrate with me and care about things with me. And that has been amazing. And I've got to do some fun stuff along the way. What about in July 2024 when we got a podcast jingle? That was cool. Possibly one of the most embarrassing moments of my life where the woman who was writing the podcast, Melissa, at Making Audio Magic, she said, "Oh, have you had any ideas?" And I had to kind of give her my ideas, and I'd sung them into the recording app on my phone. I had to play them to her actually, but oh, it was the most embarrassing thing ever. And I still cringe thinking about it. I was like, "Please don't look at me." She was like, "I'm not looking at you." She was really sweet. She was like, "Okay, great. That's really helpful." Anyway, she made an amazing podcast jingle. I'm so glad that we've got a Confident at Work podcast jingle. And here is to the next 3 years of the podcast. Sometimes I think, will I run out of things to say? Well, Clearly, it hasn't happened yet. And clients give me so many ideas. They will say one tiny little thing, and I'll think, oh, everybody needs to hear about this. So, what is the future for the podcast, too? Are there going to be different things in the future? Maybe. I would love to do some episodes where I am coaching people live, like the Confidence Coach Hotline or like the Confidence Agony Aunt. I haven't actually got round to that yet, but maybe one day I will. And then you can hear this work that we do with people live in action. So, thank you for being with me this far. Thank you for indulging me on this 3 years and the journey so far. Thank you for being a podcast listener. Thank you if you've ever shared one of these episodes with people. I appreciate you. And I will see you in next week's episode. Bye.
Confidence, confidence, confident. I can be confident.